Hello, and welcome to my channel. Try this as a series breaking down a certain game or playstyle of a game. Today we're going to be talking Commander and breaking down Lynde, Cheerful Tormentor. The video is broken down into chapters, which you can find in the description or in the timeline. I'll be briefly covering Lynde, then break down some win conditions and how we'll get there. I'll talk about some mana base and card draw strategies. I'll discuss other synergistic cards in our deck and why I think they'll help. And I'll cover some other synergy cards I cut from my example list, why they didn't fit my list but they might fit yours. And finally, I'll move on to some budget suggestions for the deck. If you like this content, please consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps other viewers discover the video and the channel. With that said, let's dive in. Lynde is a 2/4 human warlock that costs 1 blue, black, red. She has Death Touch, and whenever a curse is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return it to the battlefield attached to you at the beginning of the next end step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may attach a curse attached to you to one of your opponents. If you do, draw 2 cards. I think Lynde is an interesting commander. I always thought curses were cool, but never really experimented with them until Lynde came out. It is difficult to recur the curses in these colors, so having the ability to reattach them to yourself when they get put into the graveyard is a great addition to this card. Honestly, curses aren't that powerful by themselves, so I'm adding some other curse-like cards to help torment our opponents and bring in the win. Our goal is to eventually kill our opponents with some of our curse effects or steal value from them with cards like Curse of Unbinding and Mind's Dilation. As I mentioned, curses aren't a very powerful deck archetype. Honestly, they are more just annoying, and I found they often struggle to close out the game. However, Lynde's draw ability is actually quite strong. A good number of our curses don't do anything if attached to ourselves or don't trigger on upkeep. This gives us the ability to safely curse ourselves for card draw in the following turn. This card advantage can eventually push us into drawing our more powerful spells to threaten the board and potentially win the game. As always, I'm running my 3 auto-includes in Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Thematic Compass. The Compass is a nice early to mid-game land fetcher that flips into a protection land. Skyclave Relic, Thran Dynamo, and Wayfarer's Bauble will also ramp us. The Bauble is a solid land fetch card, and the Relic can scale with the game to get us additional mana rocks. Dockside Extortionist, Ornithopter of Paradise, and Solemn Simulacrum will also ramp us. I think Ornithopter of Paradise and Solemn Simulacrum are 2 solid creatures if you don't have access to green. Curse of Opulence was a solid card even outside of curse decks. If you're struggling to ramp in some of your other red decks, I'd recommend this card. It provides a deterrent against attacking you and can also provide you gold throughout the game. Lynde is our more reliable way to draw cards in this deck. With 18 curses in the deck, Lynde will have plenty of options to move off of us to get card advantage. Cards like Curse of Fool's Wisdom don't affect us at all. Though we technically still lose the life, we gain it right back, making it safe to enchant us and move later on. That being said, we can also help her out to make sure we always have gas in our hand. Curse of Verbosity and Curse of Surveillance can both draw us cards. As curses, again, we can also attach them to ourselves to move them for added draw later on. Verbosity might put a target on our back, but we'd still get value from the attack all the same. Rhystic Study, Sphinx of the Second Sun, and Sire of Stagnation are all cards that provide us with additional card draw. Rhystic Study probably needs no introduction. The Sphinx gives us an entire beginning phase, allowing us to not only move an additional curse that turn, but also have another draw step. Finally, Sire of Stagnation is the first of our curse-like cards. The Sire can be an effective draw engine by itself while denying a ton of value to your opponents. Starting off, we have some solid synergy cards in Claws of Gix and Paradox Haze. The Claws allow us to sacrifice our curses before our opponent's end step and get them back onto us and then move them again for added draw. This also helps us shuffle around our curses to make them more versatile. Paradox Haze just gives us an extra upkeep. This can be important as Lynde can only move 1 curse per upkeep. If our opponents wipe out our curses, it can be a little sketchy with so many curses attached to us. Unfortunately, this isn't a curse itself, so it won't come back if it gets destroyed. Let's talk about one of our most dangerous curses in the deck, Curse of Unbinding. With only 15 creatures in this deck, including our commander, this curse can fetch us some from our opponent's library. It also has the added benefit of milling them out. This could be a really useful strategy if you know that their deck also doesn't run that many creatures. The best curse to get on ourselves is Curse of Misfortunes. Along with Bitterheart Witch, this is the only way to tutor curses directly onto the battlefield. Since Lynde's ability doesn't target the curse it moves, we can actually tutor for a curse and then move that curse right away to one of our opponents. This is a very effective card to jam curses onto the battlefield and start stacking up effects. Most curses aren't dangerous on their own, they only start being a threat when you start stacking effects. To help them out, we're running 3 clone effects in Mirror Maid, Estrid's Invocation, and Extravagant Replication. These cards can create extra curses to further hurt our opponents and are flexible enough to create whatever we need among them. Good examples of curses to clone other than the ones previously mentioned are Curse of Obsession, Curse of Bloodletting, and Curse of Thirst. Obsession makes our opponents discard their hand. Bloodletting will make our other curses more effective and also work with other damage sources. Thirst will just scale with the other curses we're already throwing onto the field. I'm also running some curse-like effects in this deck. These are cards that honestly just kind of torment our opponent to fit the theme of the deck. Cards like Sire of Stagnation, which I already mentioned, is one example of this. For our curse-like cards, I'm running Shieldred Whispering One, Zantia, and Crown of Doom. Shieldred helps control our opponent's board presence while also recurring any creatures we might have in the graveyard. Zantia is more like a cursed creature. She's a pretty fun card that everyone can sink mana into for additional card draw. The Crown I've always thought was a fun card and is like a curse artifact. It's really fun watching opponents pass around the Crown and interact with one another, trying to get the buff off themselves. I find it always sparks conversations without making anyone too salty. Finally, the last curse-like card, and probably the best one, is Chandra Awakened Inferno. We'll probably never use the -X ability unless we really have a problem that needs to go. Lynde survives the small board wipe she has, which is great. However, the best part of this card, other than being uncounterable, is the +2 ability. This ability gives all of our opponents an emblem that hurts them on upkeep. This is a little lackluster at first, but it will eventually snowball into a threat that persists even if we're removed from the game. Giving our opponents yet another emblem each turn is probably the best curse we can have in this deck. Be ready though, because we'll immediately have a target on our back the second she hits the field. With making room for all these curses and curse effects, we only ended up with 14 creatures other than Lynde. Lynde can do a good job protecting ourselves having Death Touch, especially if we get Darksteel Plate on her. However, to properly protect ourselves, we need a little bit more. Barrage Taunter and Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs, can discourage our opponents from attacking us. Having an indestructible blocker is always helpful, and the tax effect on Kazul can populate our board to provide additional blockers. Silent Arbiter and Propaganda can slow down our opponents completely. These 2 cards will likely provide us with enough protection to stall out our opponents until we can stabilize a bit. Propaganda we can stack with our copy effects mentioned earlier if we need added protection. The cutting room floor is where I talk about some cards around or over $10 at the time of recording that I cut from my list for various reasons, but are worth mentioning the run. Though these cards didn't find a home in my list, they might find a home in yours. Starting off is Crawl Space to help protect us. This is usually an upgraded version of the Silent Arbiter, as it's harder to remove and only protects us, leaving our opponents open to each other. However, I cut it in favor of the creature version because it is a creature. My list doesn't have a lot of ways to protect us, and I wanted to add some extra bodies for blockers. I felt that the added risk of it being a creature was okay, because at least it could block a single huge creature coming in, which Crawl Space doesn't stop. Next, I have Bitter Blossom as an engine to produce blockers for us. I think this is a solid card that makes sense to run with the small number of creatures we have. However, I felt Lynde's Death Touch kept enough of the bigger creatures away that I didn't really need it. This is probably at the top of my list though to include in this deck. Wrapping it up, I have Opposition Agent, Mogus God of Slaughter, and Jin-Gitaxias as more curse-like effects. All these cards can torment our opponents, fitting with the theme of the deck. Some creatures that could fit your list are Nightscape Familiar, Grim Guardian, and Stuffy Doll. Most of the other curses are blue or red to fit the familiar. Grim Guardian is a card I often see in other Lynde decks, but I didn't feel like it fit mine. I didn't think I was getting enough ETB effects, and I'd rather find another curse I could potentially draw with using Lynde's ability. Stuffy Doll is a worse version of Brash Taunter, but all the same is an indestructible blocker that can save us and hurt our opponents. Curse of the Pierced Heart is a single Chandra's emblem that is a nice budget include. Along with it is Cruel Reality and Curse of Death's Hold. Cruel Reality and Death's Hold both have higher mana values than most of our other curses, but on the right opponents it can shut down certain decks. Finally, the last budget suggestion is Telepathy. This curse-like card is just fun and actually opens up so much conversation and politicking potential in the game. Honestly, it's funny to see how some opponents react to this card. It's a really simple card that can impact the game in a really significant way. I don't normally break down budget lands or other mana rocks. There are so many, and honestly the options are just endless. With a little bit of looking around, you can find whatever suits your needs and preferences. I always shout out managathering.com for this reason, as it has an organized list of lands and rocks that are easy to navigate. It is also an incredible resource when building in colors you are not really familiar with. I didn't cover every card in this deck or every suggestion I have for Lynde, so if you'd like to see the rest, check out the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Comment below on cards you think synergize well with this commander, and if you have any suggestions for commanders to build in the future. Thank you so much for watching, good luck, and have fun.